This is the magicwordpodcast.com.
Hello, this is Scott Wells for the magicwordpodcast.com. This week's episode is brought to you by the Magic at the Beach Magic Convention coming up October 5th, 6th, and 7th. You can get all the information that you really need to know by going to magicatthebeach.org. We'll have a brief message by one of the sponsors, representatives, later in this podcast. We also want to thank, welcome, and show our appreciation with this shout out to our newest friend of the Magic Word, Chuck Feltner. Thank you very much, Chuck. I appreciate you joining the group and for your donation via PayPal. It is because of people like you that we were able to keep this podcast going and for free online to the rest of the world. Thank you so very much, and I thank again all of the friends of the Magic Word, and you know who you are. You are the ones who give your financial support, so thank you guys very much. For more information on how you can help us, just go to the magicwordpodcast.com. There you can find a video and understand more about why we really need your support. Well, this week's episode with Greg Frewin is very interesting because he is going to be talking about not only part of his career, working with birds and working with Jason Byrne, who, by the way, is someone we had sometime earlier as one of the featured guests on an episode here at the Magic Word. But also, he has developed his act as he has competed in contests as well as at FISM, and also having an award-winning act, and then settling in a theater in Niagara Falls area in Canada. And he has really been killing it there for a number of years and doing an amazing job. But he's coming to kind of the end of his career, if you will. And I think that's what's kind of interesting is how do you go about passing a baton to someone else and kind of slowly deciding that you want to bow out, and how you kind of appoint your apprentice and how do you train your apprentice. So this week we not only talk with Greg about that, because it's not that he's nearing the end of his career, because I believe he'll be doing magic for the rest of his life until the end, but he is slowly going to be turning over the reins of as a main performer at his theater to Christian Mascia. And Christian is going to be one of the people who is on this podcast this week also, so you can hear us talk a little bit about what he's doing and what his future looks like then as well. This is a very interesting episode because, again, we talk not only about a career of a person who started out as a bird magician, but also he has worked with the large cats as well. You might recall that some time ago we talked with Rick Thomas about working with large cats. So we've had a few people on from time to time who have had this experience, but we will talk a little bit about that as well as illusions and theaters, because the theaters seem to be very popping up everywhere, and everyone seems to be very interested in perhaps opening up their own theater someplace in their locale. And then also about passing the baton, as I said, to the next generation. Well, enough for me. Let's hear more from our guest here this week, who, by the way, will be one of the featured performers at the Magic at the Beach convention, who is our sponsor this week. It just so happens. So if you want to see Greg, then you need to register for the convention and come to Myrtle Beach. Well, please welcome my guest this week, Mr. Greg Frewin, here on The Magic Word. Today, we are with a noted illusionist, and from time to time, we do have a few people who are illusionists that I've spoken with. You can go back and listen to those others, like with Rick Thomas and, of course, Rick Wilcox and some other people over the past several years. But it's always interesting then also, particularly to talk with the gentleman we're talking with today, because he had a show for a while with another magician who was on the podcast with us some time ago, and that was Jason Byrne, and the two of them had worked together. And then Greg had gone on then to move to across the country, open up his own show in Niagara Falls, and has been doing that for at least a decade. And we'll get into all that and some more then as well. And with him today then is Christian Mascia, and he's going to add a little bit of color and background as well on how this is going. First of all, here's my guest, Greg Frewin. Hey there, Greg. How are you?
Hey, how you doing?
I'm fantastic. So glad you came here today.
Yeah.
And I'm up here as we were speaking in the Buffalo area, and you're just kind of down the road almost literally literally just about 15, 20 miles away in Niagara Falls, or?
Yeah, as they say, a stone throw away. I think that's the expression. Yeah, I'm over in Niagara Falls on the Canadian side. The only thing good that we have in Canada over the American side. So it's a really cool place.
The view is much better over there.
Yeah, we got lucky. America has everything else, though. We got Niagara Falls, Canada. That's our side. That's it.
But if you want to go there, now you have to have a passport just to go across to take a look at the view from there.
As a matter of fact, that actually is interesting because during the 2000, I think it was 9, around that area, before they had to have passports, people could come across really easy.
Sure.
Then all of a sudden, in 1 week, they made the decision to put the passports on. And it devastated Niagara Falls for that summer.
Oh, the tourism was just...
Nobody had passports.
Never thought about that.
Yeah.
Because you have to go through that whole process.
Correct.
Most people just drove back and forth. Probably also people who are working back and forth, and going back and forth.
So interesting how business is, right?
It really is. And I recall many years ago of when we did have the 4F convention in the Forks Hotel, and oftentimes we would go over to Niagara. And I remember going to the Houdini Museum, and then I remember one time Rudy Colby and I had gone over there. I'd taken a picture of him. He brought his legs with him, and I got a picture of him with Niagara Falls in the background, kind of fun. We were rooming together. Anyhow, so when... over in Niagara Falls, why did you decide, well, I guess kind of go back, to begin with, when you were working with Jason. So the two of you you both had bird acts, but you were the kind of the illusionist, he was kind of the bird man, right?
Well, actually, I started out as a bird magician. I didn't do illusions before any of that. We both actually won Abbott's on the same year. He was in the junior contest, I was in the senior, and that's how we met. What year would that have been? Oh, gosh. Oh, now you're dating us.
80s, maybe?
It would have been probably like 89, 90 maybe.
Okay.
Maybe in there.
We'll say 90.
You'll say 90. You'll say 90. Make us feel better.
Yeah.
But we both competed and won our categories or our age group. And then we started hanging out. He was from Windsor, Ontario, and about 4 hours away from Niagara Falls. And we started hanging out. And I just one day mentioned, I said, I remember an act years ago called United Artists. It was two magicians. They did magic where they had 4 arms at one point. And I said, how cool that was. I said, wouldn't that be neat if 2 guys could do a bird act together? And then Jason looked at me with this expression of, wow, that'd be cool. And by the next morning, we had written out a bunch of ideas and we started putting the act together. And I guess the rest is what they call history.
When you started putting that together, were you coming up with these ideas independently, or did you kind of brainstorm overnight? And
kind of. We actually did kind of a dual thing. We each had our own acts to begin with. Correct. So we took pieces out of each act that we already currently had that we liked. Then we created a few other pieces. With 2 guys, you can do a lot more, though. So there's a lot of things we were able to come up with that you wouldn't be able to do as a conventional single magician or single bird act. So we just sort of jammed out ideas for the next week, and we were able to come up with some really amazing and different ways to produce a dove. But we both did our bird acts for years prior to that. And
your styles were different.
A little bit, yeah. But we had similarities in a certain way, which was kind of interesting. That's why when we did the act, we called it double vision. It was almost like seeing two of the same guy, right? Like double vision. But our styles were similar. I'll say this much.
I mean, you weren't like Dan Sperry, and
Right. Yeah, exactly. But our one thing that was very common, was our drive to do a really incredible bird act. So I think that's what really fueled the whole idea of this double vision act.
Now, where did you go and take that? I mean, aside from conventions, were there a lot of corporate places you could book an act like that?
So this was one of the problems. So I'm more on a business side of things than a lot of magicians. I always think first.
And I'm glad we're talking, because that's how I talk about this.
Right. Well, yeah, there's a lot to talk about in that side of it. But, we did do, we worked with Franz Ferrari in Taiwan for, I think it was like 3 months. We did a couple other small corporates that I had in my hometown of Stony Creek, Ontario, which is right by Niagara Falls. But it was really difficult because anytime, even the castle, they wanted to book us. But now it's 2 flights, 2 sets of meals, like everything's double.
Yeah.
But they didn't pay double. And so
you had to share a room.
Correct. And all of a sudden you're sitting there going, well, on a business side, this is going to be difficult. And so it just was one of those things.
Well, it's not like a spouse, where you can kind of share like that, because you're both trying to make a living for each other.
That's
independent. Right.
So you're really making half a living if you think about it.
Well, good point.
So, so it was sort of very early on, it was sort of evident that this probably won't kind of last. It wasn't something that we never really planned it to be, hey, this is our future forever. But it really was good because it got both of us our foot in the door of the magic community. People all of a sudden, we did Abbott's first, and then we did Tannins that year and we actually had to call Tannins. I had to call up Tony Spina. I don't want to say beg to get on the show, but he's like, well, he didn't know who we were. He's like, oh, we're already booked up. We can't book anyone else.
Yeah.
We wanted to go because they were honoring Channing Pollock.
Wow. Yes.
And I didn't care if we were getting paid. I didn't care. I just wanted to go.
Yeah. Well, you got on stage even. You're like, but if we can get paid, that's
right.
Just a bonus. Yeah.
So I said, look, I'll send you the tape and just look at it and whatever. And he told me the story later that when the tape arrived, he was up, they were in the Tannins in the shop.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's a bunch of local guys there. I don't know who exactly now, and they put the tape on and they were kind of going, oh, another act. And then they all of a sudden went, well, what is this? Because it was two guys doing stuff that never been done before.
Yeah, yeah.
And he immediately called me and said, well, I'd like to book you. So it was the most coolest thing. We got to be on stage. We performed the night that they gave Channing his, award.
Was that the Milburn Christopher Award?
No, well, Tannins used to do it more like they honored him, but I don't know what they called it. I can't remember the name of the award, but it was great to be backstage. We're there in our outfits, ready to do the act. And I remember saying to Channing, I said, Channing, after the show, I'd love you to give us any, tips or whatever advice. And he looked at me with that Channing way, and he looked up and down and looked at our outfits, and he looked at me and said, I think you guys got this all figured out.
That is awesome.
Yeah, and I'm sitting there going, what do you mean? We haven't even done our act yet. But he looked like he could see that our tuxedos were tightly,
They fit.
Yeah, everything was perfect, and he was so cool. So that was sort of one of the moments in
what
magic
an inspiration. It's kind of like I've been given the approval, the okay. It's kind of like Johnny Carson, sitting in the chair over there and giving an okay to the act or something. It's like, you guys have got it.
That's it. So then we did, like I say, we did a few more things, but then it just became very evident that on a business side, this was going to be a very difficult thing to do.
Now, again, getting booked beyond conventions, what other kind of venues did you work?
Well, once again, I used to work for an agent in my hometown that would do phone sales shows where they sell out arenas for a cause and things like that, or theaters.
Like a phone room show.
Yeah, phone room show.
Yeah.
But once again, it was same thing, you're paying. And back then, I was still starting my career, so I couldn't demand big money.
Sure.
So now everything was divided in two, and it just became very difficult. It really, we were starving artists already. Now you're cutting that little bit of the pie in half, right?
Yeah. And it took just as much time
or
more.
That's right.
For the two of you to coordinate your time together.
And I think we also had a little bit different vision, both of us. Looking back now, I mean, I didn't see it quite then, but we both had different visions on what our careers would want to do. Mm-hmm. For me, opening this theater, and if you go back and look at the Magic Live article I was in after I won FISM, mm-hmm. I said in there, I've had it all mapped out and I wanted to own my own theater and have my own show. And so I think for me, I was already planning one way. And I think for Jason, he wanted to stay more the direction he went, which is fine. Each person has their own way.
Right. But you never had the long-term vision of saying, hey, we're going to be the new Siegfried and Roy.
Correct.
And stay together forever.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep. Yep.
Well, that's interesting. Yeah. So that you both just kind of look at each other and say, well, I think it's time.
Yeah. And it was good because once again, it got us both notoriety in the business. Right. And that's the hardest part in this business, as you know, is trying to get your first, how do you get people to know who you are?
Correct.
And so that way, when you go to these competitions or different things, people start to know. And because, competitions are funny. Just because you're in one doesn't mean, everyone's going to know who you are after. But if they hear about you before, you know what it's like. Oh, I got to go make sure I'm at the contest. I want to see this guy or that person or whatever, right?
Right. Well, as far as your strategy went back then, was your goal to win competitions in order to get that notoriety so that way you can work conventions and you become more well-known among magicians and then launch that into something else? Or
there's a yes and a no to this.
Okay.
So I competed I.B.M. and S.A.M., and that was the goal with those.
Yeah.
And for me, actually, the I.B.M., the one thing that I always dreamed about, but wasn't kind of in the plan 100%. But the one thing for me was, Lance Burton won the gold medal back.
Yep.
I think he was the first one, actually, I think.
79?
Yeah. And for me, that was always like, wow. And Lance is my idol, still is. I mean, the most amazing.
I'm sure you're good friends.
Oh, yeah. But I mean, growing up watching him on TV and stuff was just so. I.B.M., that was also a little part of it. I thought, wow, it'd be really cool if I could win first place. I never would have thought
gold medal.
Gold medal. And when they came out and gave me that, it was like, I just remember that moment of being, wow, this is the coolest thing ever. But then FISM, Nathan Burton's a good friend of mine at the time. He told me he was booked to go. I just wanted the agents to see me. Mm-hmm. So I actually wasn't planning on competing. So I sent my tape so I could get booked.
Yeah. At FISM?
At FISM.
Yeah.
And that year it was in Yokohama, Japan.
For those people, by the way, who are listening, who are unaware that FISM is championships, there are a lot of contests, but they also have evening shows
Correct.
that are paid acts that are not competing.
Correct. So, and once again, going back to my sort of way I think of always this as being a business, to fly to Japan and hotel and food, I just couldn't. I wasn't at that point yet.
Thousands of dollars.
Well, yeah. And I grew up. My dad was a steel worker, so we didn't have a lot of money. And so I put my tape in thinking, well, I just want I.B.M. and S.A.M. I'm sure they'll hire me.
Of course.
Well, the phone call never came. And so I thought, oh, well, maybe the next one. And then I got a phone call about 6 months before, and they're saying, how come you're not competing? And I said, well, I'm kind of done with competing. I didn't really plan on it. And they said, we really want you to come and compete. And
you automatically qualify, particularly if you're a gold medal winner.
Yes, correct.
So you don't have to go through the championship.
Yep, that's right.
Preliminaries.
Well, it was a little different back then. They didn't actually do all that
true.
back then. And it was the process was more of getting signatures. You had to have so many signatures.
Right.
So it was a little different.
Would recommend you.
Correct.
In testimony.
And then I said to them, I said, look, unfortunately, I just can't afford to fly. And at the time, my wife was in the act. She appeared at the end. I can't afford 2 airline tickets, hotel. I just don't have the money. And they called me back and said, there's a gentleman that would like to sponsor and pay for your flight. So I said, okay, I'll come. So the rest is history.
Wow.
Yeah. And without that, financially, I just couldn't do it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Which of those would you say really launched your career? And what I don't mean by that necessarily that it was because of that people started saying, hey, he's a FISM winner or he's a Grand Prix winner, or a gold medal winner or something like that. But maybe just mentally in your mind thinking, okay, I've got it. I guess I really can do it. They gave you the confidence. I guess
sure.
I'm saying. You know what
but
I'm saying?
I think the gold medal did a lot, but I think the FISM was interesting for me because I went in when I went in to FISM, I went in under as a Canadian, and back then Canada didn't have any organization that associated with FISM. Little did I know all this back then. So when I went in and competed, how FISM worked back then was the highest marks would get the Grand Prix, whichever category, whether it be comedy, close-up, whatever. Well, I had the highest marks, but they ended up deducting marks from me because I was Canadian and I didn't have an association or affiliation with FISM. So I lost the Grand Prix, which was fine. But the controversy after was the interesting thing because people started talking about it everywhere. So I couldn't have asked for anything better because agents
saying,
all
how come this guy
I got a TV show actually in Chile because they heard about me because of the controversy side of it.
How
meaning,
interesting is that?
why did they take it away from them, et cetera, et cetera. So, life's funny how it works, right? Because really, in the end of the day, for me, it's always been about getting that recognition and get your name out. If they don't know who you are, they can't book you.
I had competed in a contest once, didn't win, but afterwards, some guy who's a corporate executive said, I know you didn't win, but he said, of all the acts, I thought personally you were the best as far as
right.
They were fooling magicians. I was looking at doing something fooling, the
people.
Yeah.
Right. Well, and that's the way it is
I got
too,
a good
right?
booking out of that.
Well, it's great. And see, that's what it's all about. And to me, in the end, the goal was to get the agents and the worldwide, because back in those days, it was a little different than it is now on how acts got booked. There was a lot of these shows where you could go in with an 8-minute act. Those shows are gone. But where you would have these shows all over the world, France, in Paris, they had the Crazy Horse, the Lido, yeah. So there's a lot of those kind of shows all over the world, and that's how you need those agents to know who you were to get those bookings. So after FISM, it just sort of went, and from
did
there,
you have an agent then?
Not at the moment. At that time, no. But then my dad started managing me shortly after that.
Okay.
Because
what
it just got.
Did he have in managing people?
Well, he was actually deputy governor of Kinsman Clubs across Canada. So he was very.
I'm not familiar with that organization.
Well, it's kind of like it's a men's club, like
a Lions Club,
like a Lions Club,
okay.
Yeah. And so he was deputy governor of all of Canada.
Okay. And
he did a lot of traveling with that, and he was very good with working with people in that way. So, I mean, in the end of the day, as long as you're dealing with, because then from his point, he would deal with the agents. I didn't have to worry about being on the phone. It's the hardest thing is to sell yourself, as you know, right?
I know.
How do you say, well, how's your act? Well, I'm the best ever. I'm so great. I'm so.
You walk a fine line there because you might seem too conceited. It's like, I don't want this guy. We want somebody who's friendly. It's nice,
Right. So, it's really, it was really good. And so anyway, from there, we started booking. That's when the real world work started to come in.
along that line for a moment, there was a friend of mine who used to work a lot of college or high school in children's, what am I trying to say, just school shows, basically. And he would go in and talk with the principal, but he had a secretary, a lady he had hired to work with him. And whenever it came to money, and they'd say, well, how much is this going to be? And he said, that's where she's going to come in. I'll leave. And he stepped out of the room.
Interesting.
And so this way that she would negotiate the price, and then the principal would say, well, we've only got so much money. He said, well, it's going to cost us. I don't know if he'll take that. So just let me go talk. It's kind of like the car salesman.
Yep.
Let me go talk to my manager and see.
Exactly. That's a great principle. I have to use that. Well, and there's other good things that came out of it. And when I came home after FISM, so Joan Caesar, as you know very well, her son Ben was young. And I was working, and he would come to he would come over to my place, and I'd help him work on different things here and there. And they came over just a little after FISM, and we were talking about it. And Joan said, how'd it go? And I told her the story, and I said, unfortunately, there's no Canadian association. And Joan, in brilliance in my mind, decided, well, I'm going to start an organization. So she from that started the CAM, the Canadian Association of Magicians.
She's an organizer.
Yep. And she put all that together. The stuff she went through, the conventions she traveled to, the path she took to get to where CAM is now, and to have that ability for Canadian magicians to go to conventions like FISM was amazing. So, I give a lot of credit to Joan for doing what she did.
Yeah, because CAM has been around for what now, 20 years?
Oh, a little more, because it would have been right after FISM, so 94,
yeah.
right? So,
yeah.
I think more like 30. Close to 30, yeah.
30 years, I guess so. When you were, again, always really in Canada, but did you do very much work in the United States?
Before our FISM, no. But then as soon as I finished competing FISM, I got booked Atlantic City, then to Colombia, South America, then to a cruise ship, all back to back, like literally back to back. And it was going to be like almost an 8-month period of time. And my wife and I, she wasn't in the act yet fully, but because she had a job at the time, she was an accountant. So she had to get rid of her job, pack up the house. We literally just changed our lives almost in a 1 month period.
When did you actually change over from birds to more illusions, into which you know what I'm saying? Until finally the majority of your act is illusions. So
it sort of became a little bit stages, kind of, but when I got that first cruise ship job,
no pun intended.
Yeah, exactly. When I got the cruise ship job, I went out and first thing I did was bought an origami because I love the illusion, but it also made sense. It was small to play. It's one of those
surrounded.
Yeah, it's perfect illusion in that way and in a lot of ways. And I had a Metamorphosis trunk that I had a Chalet one from way back before.
A zigzag, maybe?
Nope, no zigzag at the time. And so I had those two illusions. I went out on the cruise ship. And from there, I just started, acquiring a few pieces here and there. But then I actually started building my own props, like my Shrouded Transition, the Metamorphosis I do.
Beautiful.
Thank you. And I built that while on the Murray Hatfield tour, which used to go across Canada. But the first 5 weeks of that's all around Toronto area, which is my home turf.
Okay.
So I would leave the theater every night, drive home, work on the prop in my dad's basement through the night and in the morning, back to the theater, do the shows, and back and forth.
Goodness.
And I actually, after Murray's tour, I was going back out on another cruise ship, and I wanted to take it with me so I could start working with it.
Right.
So I just started building and acquiring and trying to create and sort of build the show.
Did you kind of ditch the doves around that time?
Nope. Never ditched the doves for years. I'll tell you, they went into the theater even in Niagara Falls up until about 8 years ago.
Okay.
So I kept the Dove Act all those years. I did it in Vegas, Atlantic City, all over the world. I was in the Bahamas for a couple of years. I did it in Malaysia. When I got here to Canada and I opened up the theater, I did it for the first, close to 10 years. And then it just became Jack Goldfinger told me this one day. He said, Greg, one day you'll have 7 doves in the show. Then it'll be 6. Then it'll be 5, and he went through this process. He goes, then you're going to be down to that one dove. And he said,
you're going to have one
dove. And he goes, that one's the hardest one to get rid of. And he says,
he's married to his wife named Dove.
That's right. That's funny.
That's going to be hard to get rid of.
Right. But you know what it came down to? It was the show at the theater. We were getting a lot of repeat people. And I one year decided I'm going to change it up. It was really weird to say I'm going to take the bird act out of the show. Because I'm thinking
that's been your
opener for my
heart
life.
and soul. Uh-huh.
And I'm thinking, okay, well, in my head, I'm going, well, I got to do, what am I going to do? Because the audience, I got to get, but they never seen the show before, some of them. So it's like they're just seeing a clean slate. And I remember going out the first night, and the show in the end, people loved it. And I thought, in all these years I've been doing all that hard work, but I mean, I really missed it. And I actually put it back together to go do FISM last year. I did it for the...
I remember when we were in Quebec.
Yeah, in Quebec. Probably the last time I'll ever do it. It's just a very complicated
I think
act.
You said that also.
Yeah,
you were saying, I haven't done this in a while, and this is probably the last time you'll see this.
Yeah, and it's one of those things you kind of, part of me still wants to go, but there's a certain point in your career where you realize I don't need that anymore. And it's not that it's in any way, shape or form. It's just
part of your history.
It's part of my history, and I've moved on. And plus it's also getting very, this new world of, I don't know, woke, I think they call it, whatever, where there's a lot of people that are against animals in show business, whether you take care of them or not, they don't care. I mean, I'm on the board of I'm the vice chairman of the Niagara SPCA. So I do a lot of work with rescue animals and stuff. Always looked after my animals well, but in the end of the day, people just perceive it as,
I want to get into that just a little bit as well, because of traveling, particularly those who are thinking about doing cruise ships or thinking about doing a Dove act on that and about traveling with them. But I recall many years ago, in fact, the first time I was working at the Magic Castle, and Bill Larson had sent me a letter back then in the old days, back in the early 80s, and said, because I was going by the name of Great Scott, and he said, are you the same one who was working the Azure Seas? Because the SPCA has a suit against Great Scott for mishandling his doves.
Wow.
And I said, no, I've never been on that. And so I've changed my name, and said, well, you need to use another name. I said, I'll just use Scott Wells. I'll get rid of the Great Scott. And then ever since then, I've never used that since. But apparently, even back then, apparently they had someone who had filed a complaint, I guess, with a cruise ship, which got to the SPCA, of saying that he was mishandling his doves or some sort.
And it's sad. I mean, unfortunately, here's the problem, and I always say this, and it's like any industry, we can say it about, there are good people and there are bad people that work with animals. And, the sad thing is those bad people make the good people look bad. Because we in life, we always want to, it's kind of a funny thing how humans are. We always want to find the bad. And it's funny when you see how they take celebrities, they build them up, but they can't wait to pull them back down, right? As soon as they find something like,
what a great act,
but, so it's sad because, there was myself and there was a lot of people that worked. And I mean, look at Almost Lefkovich. Look at the way he treated his animals,
oh my goodness. I got a good story about him. When I was working with him at the Magic Island, and one time, it was after we were finished, and it was like 1 a.m. or something, and several of us were going to go out for breakfast. Well, I was driving a Suburban at the time, a Chevy Suburban, so he put his doves in the back of that, and when we went in for breakfast, he came out to check on his doves just to make sure they were still okay 4 times. I mean, he left the table to go out, and he said, give me the keys. Could I go in and look at them? I mean, they were his children.
And I mean, that's the part of traveling I hated, because when you're traveling, it's always that word back then. Oh my gosh, are the birds going to be okay? And, and even when I went into big cats 25 years ago, when we moved to Canada, we bought a big property and we started raising some babies, and I would sit, and this is
human babies or animal
No,
babies?
Animal babies.
Okay.
Well, I raised some human babies too. I raised a couple of human babies, but I'm talking about my tigers. And they at night will do this almost like a roar. It's just how they communicate in the wild.
Okay.
And I would be in bed and I'd be asleep and I'd wake up and I go, oh, I wonder if they're okay. My wife used, oh no, they're fine. They're fine. I go, and they make another wow. All right, I'm going out to check them. And I get all dressed up, middle of winter, walk all the way out to the common, open the lights on, turn everything on, and they look at me and go, hey, what are you doing?
Is it daytime yet?
Yeah.
Ready to play?
It's one of those things, because, the way I view it is they're not just part of the act. They have to be part of your family. If they're not part of your family and you don't look at that this way, you really shouldn't be working with them if that's the way you look
That's
at it.
a good point. I remember the story that Siegfried was talking about many years ago, in which they had their animals. Then when they went to do the show, the neighbors were complaining because the animals were still roaring. So they decided to bring them with them. So and also the animals were jealous. Like, okay, you're choosing this one, but not this one. And then ones are staying back, they would roar the whole time. So we got to take them all.
And it was interesting because people say, well, they don't even want to be in the show. And it's actually totally the opposite.
Yes.
I had a female and she became, over the years, she got old, and she was about 14 at the time. And so what we would do is I would rotate her in and out of the show so she didn't have to work every night. And the nights we would leave her, my wife would say, you got to take her. She's out there. She's just crying. She's just the whole time you're gone. Yeah. Because once we would take the other animals, she knew. Yeah. She knew.
What's wrong with me?
Yeah. And so it is amazing how they because when we're on stage, we would always communicate, and it was always like people wouldn't see it, but I'd be like, "Good girl, giving them a pet."
Yeah.
And they look at that. That's positive reinforcement.
Sure.
That's also behavioral enrichment. They're doing something that works their mind. That they don't want to. People think they just want to lay around, and no, they like a dog, like a cat, a house cat. They have to have something to do with their mind during the day. They can't just be. So, it's unfortunate that people get the wrong impression or the wrong opinion, but, I had a great run, though. We went almost 25 years with the big cats. We finally just took them out of the show.
I was going to say, at what time or what year did you finally take them out?
Well, we decided during COVID because they were getting really old.
Yeah, and you weren't going to replace them.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Am I going to go and, breed a bunch of babies, and then, let's say 5 years down the road, I decide to retire. Now I got these cats, and then it's not fair on them, right?
No.
So we made the decision, this is a good time. COVID changed a lot for a lot of people, right? When you think about it. And then that was also the decision. I sat on the couch. My wife would work during the day at the theater. Then I go and do the shows at night. We kind of crossed paths during dinner. And during COVID, I looked over at the couch and I said, I kind of like hanging out with you.
Yeah.
We should do a little more of this. So that's when we decided it was time to take a step back.
And now we'll take a short break for a word from our sponsor. Magic at the Beach. That's the name of the convention, and it's going to be awesome. I hope you guys are going to be there. It's coming up October the 5th, 6th, and 7th in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. And today I've got with me one of the hosts of the convention who has his own theater where most of the activities will take place. Please welcome my guest here, Charles Bach. Hey there, Charles.
Hi, Scott. Great to be here.
I'm glad that you're here with me, too. I know we've talked in previous weeks about some of the fantastic lineup that you've got. This is going to be great. But tell me about some of the lectures. Who's going to be lecturing?
So we're really lucky to have 8 lectures during this 3-day convention. So there's plenty of magic to learn and some amazing talents to share. So Dan Harlan, who everybody knows is one of the most creative and inventive people in magic, and he's going to be lecturing at the convention, and we're excited to have him with some brand new magic. He also has a new version of his cartoon that he'll be presenting as well.
Wow, that'll be a little bit different. I had heard that he had something new, but I've not seen that yet, so I'm anxious to check that out. Who else have you got?
So next on our list, we have, there are 8 lectures, so there's going to be quite a few, but I'll run them down. We have Steve Beam, who many magicians know from his creative card magic and his books that he has out. He's got some amazing magic. He's super funny as well and gives a great lecture. We're excited to have him. And then John Chirac, who is probably one of my favorite magicians who can do anything. He can do close-up, stage, parlor. His outstanding commercial sleight of hand magic is going to be part of his lecture. And then we have something for the children's show performers. The Amazing Adams is one of the top magicians in Chicago, and he's going to be talking about the business of children's entertainment. And he does over 435 shows a year. He's going to tell you why and how you can grow your own business.
Mm-hmm. That sounds like a widely diverse subjects and people you're going to be having.
I'm still not finished. Yeah, we still have more.
Okay.
Scott, you're right. We did go out of our way to find really wide, diverse lectures. So it wasn't all the same. It wasn't all card magic. It wasn't all kids shows. It wasn't all stage. It was a wide variety. So we really do appeal to everybody. That was really important to us to include everything. I'm going to be lecturing on the watch steal. Back in the day, we put out the
awesome
video. A lot of people have it probably on their library shelf.
Yeah, you and your friend, I'd forgotten, what was his name in Vegas?
That was Chappie Brazil.
Brazil. He did a great one.
And it was an amazing video. He was probably the best watch thief I've ever seen in my life. And
this is going to be worth the cost of the convention to me. I really want to do a good watch steal. I've been looking for how to do this. Okay, looking forward to this. I'm just excited.
Watch bands have changed, and I'm updating the lecture with all those new things. Now that the Apple Watch is out there, there's some new opportunities for people to steal watches that might actually make it a little bit easier for you, which I think is the challenge that most magicians run into. But we also have the history of magic with Chip Romero, who's bringing his FISM lecture right here with also some brand new information about Doug Henning and some of the show props he'll be bringing to the convention as well.
Wow. Yeah, he is a Mr. Doug Henning expert, certainly.
He definitely is. And it's a wonderful lecture, and it is absolutely fascinating. He's an inspiration for a ton of magicians, and Doug Henning is really still an influence in magic for sure. So we'll have Christian Miro, who is from Argentina originally and now living in Spain. He's a comedy magician, and he's going to give some killer magic routines and his magic theory. And he has an amazing sense of charm and ability to work an audience, as well as clear handling of the audience volunteers and the magic to get the best response. It's really going to be a pleasure to have his approach to magic. And there's one more performer that is not a magician. He is a street performer and one of the top street performers in Faneuil Hall in Boston. And his name is Wacky Chad. And he's going to be lecturing on street performing and busking, which has become a whole new thing as well because people have stopped carrying cash. And he has all the techniques of how to not only get the money out of people, but also different ways of doing it besides the cash options that used to be a tip jar.
Right. That sounds amazing. Now, but all of the lectures will take place right there in your Wonders Theater. Is that correct?
Yes. So we have all the production elements and the slides and all the AV that they're interested in having available to them. So it's really going to be a good opportunity to experience the lectures in the best possible light.
Sounds great. Charles, thanks very much for filling us in. It sounds like a wonderful convention and an educational one that everyone will learn from. And I say everyone because, again, with a diverse background that you've got with so many different people talking about so many different things, this ought to be awesome. So everybody needs to go to magicatthebeach.org and sign up for that. Coming up October 5th, 6th, and 7th in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. Thanks again, Charles.
Thank you, Scott.
Now back to our conversation for this week's episode.
During COVID, I looked over at the couch and I said, I kind of like hanging out with you.
Yeah.
We should do a little more of this. So that's when we decided it was time to take a step back and kind of go into semi-retirement from the show. We're going to run the business. And I have Christian here who you met just earlier.
Yeah.
And we're working him into the show to take over. He's an amazing young magician. He's got the drive I had when I was a kid. He's got the ability on stage. And I said to my wife, you know, when there's a certain point that 35 years on the road, all over the place, 17 years at the theater, when are we going to we got to start to enjoy a bit. And I don't want to be that guy when I'm like 70 who's still out there doing it. And maybe I shouldn't be doing it.
Yeah.
You know,
you're kind of missing a step and you don't want to, particularly with cats around.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
So we made all those decisions during COVID. We just decided, okay, this is the path we're going to take. We'll take the cats out of the show. Retire them. One of my females during COVID, we had to put down. She was 19. And for those that may not know, average age of a tiger in the wild is about 8-9 years.
In the wild, probably true.
Wild. Yeah. And in captivity, a lot of places, maybe 12. And she lived 19 years.
Wow.
So, you know, they lived a great life. And we were just decided we're not going to start this all over again.
Now, I was talking to Rick Thomas about this, and he had taken all of his tigers and, you know, big cats to a preserve. Yep. And so he raises money. He sells these little, tigers in a show in the back of the room sales, and with the proceeds going to that. And so with those, when you say retired, and did you send them to some place or reserve or
right
zoo?
Now, they're in a couple of places that are friends of mine that have great environments. We're trying to get them down right now to Florida because that's where we bought a place, my wife and I, and we're gonna be living out our older years out there, and still going back and forth to Niagara to keep the business. But I'd love to get them down there so that I can find there's a place that I'd like to put them in. That's the same thing, but I can go visit.
Sure.
And also because of what I do, the work I do with animals, we've actually been working with our Niagara SPCA has been working with Daytona SPCA. So I'd like to get more involved with that when I'm down there. And part of it would be if I can get my cats to a reserve, I would go and spend time working there. No charge, just to be with them and give back because they gave us so much.
With your animals.
Yep.
Right. And now, going back a minute because I was talking about doing cruises and for people who might be interested, I know it's difficult to in certain countries versus others as far as where you have to quarantine your doves or whatever. What kind of stories have you had or issues with that?
Well, it got to the point actually, Scott, that back it's really tough now. But back in my day of traveling, it was easy to do. There's a lot of paperwork involved. But then the airlines started charging you like per dove, and it got ridiculous.
Per dove.
Yeah. So what it was, they had this new regulation that I don't know who put it out, but it was only 2 animals per kennel was a regulation. So you have these under seat carriers that I could fit 4 to 5 birds in comfortably. I saw a lady one day at the airport had 2 cats shoved in one of these little things, barely could fit.
Yeah, couldn't turn around.
But yet they wouldn't let me put 5 doves in this cage that had tons of room.
And this was U.S.
Well, it was more the airlines would push it. I think it was done through USDA, maybe the regulation, but the airlines would put it was all money grab.
Of course.
They wanted to charge you for. So I would do the old, well, if I can have them on stage without anybody knowing. I can have them on the plane without anybody knowing.
I've heard a story about Johnny Thompson.
Yeah,
Yeah.
So I would load the birds up, go on the plane, go to the bathroom, unload them, and
Right.
And there's a very funny story about that. So, and then I would, on a long flight, when we would take off, I put them in the overhead bin just while we were taking off. And we got out on the taxied out on the tarmac, and we were waiting, and about 2 hours sitting on the tarmac waiting. And I was getting a little nervous because I wanted to bring them back down to below the seat, right? And so I could keep an eye on them. And finally, the door opens of the plane, and a couple of mechanics come on board from the airline. And these mechanics come up to the hostess or the stewardess, and they say, she goes, I heard the birds up in here that must be stuck. They thought there was birds stuck up in the,
gosh,
they held the plane for 2 hours because of my doves. So I had to stand there and go, sorry.
That's me.
That's me. I got a lot of really pissed off people looked at me on the airline.
Boy, I can just imagine the dirty looks you got. And after you got off.
So from that point on, when I get on, because the stewardesses didn't care. It was the people that would check you in that were, trying to, it's like the extra baggage now. They're just trying to get more money, right? It was a crazy thing. But back in those days, you could pretty well travel, go anywhere with them. You just had to do paperwork and make sure.
Well, that's what I've heard about before. And that, again, talk about money, because you'd be stopping at some islands and they may say, well, you can't bring them on. They got a quarantine. So, well, how about if I give you some extra cash?
Yeah.
Well, say,
exactly.
okay, well, that's fine.
Exactly.
But I'd also heard, like, some guys, like when you're cruising, and oftentimes you would get off on one island and then they wait for the next ship to come in and pick you up, and you kind of do that circle like that. But you had to leave your doves to quarantine for a month. And so they had different doves they were picking up along the way that had been quarantined.
Oh, geez.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I never did any of that, actually. So because I guess maybe I did a full big illusion show, I would always stay on the ship for like 6 months straight. I wouldn't do a bunch of ship hopping. So I never had to encounter that. But I did do a couple of world cruises where I had to fly into really bizarre places like Western Samoa. I think it was called Pongo Pongo or some little island. And I took the birds with me, but it's just, it was hard because my wife and I had the whole thing down. We knew how to, everything, go through the customs and everything, but it became a real pain in the ass. It was a lot of work.
Man, I can imagine.
Yeah.
Well, I would think also that illusions would be even more difficult. I assume you left those on some ships as you...
Sure, but the illusions were great because you would send them ahead of time, and then they would just pick up... when you got on the ship in the morning, they would put them on in the basement through one of the forklifts, and guys on the ship would bring them up to the theater. I never touched my stuff.
Oh, that's great.
It would go from my house to the ship without me touching them.
Because I've heard Franz Roy would have multiple things, and he would have cargo ships going from China or wherever, and he'd be picking them up. So he had different shows that he would that would meet him. But if they didn't arrive in time, you're kind of screwed unless you got
Well, and that's where you have to have that little case with your with stuff, extra stuff. We always had that. Yeah. And luckily, we only had a few instances through all of the traveling that cases got missed or whatever, or couldn't find. But there's I came back from a ship from Vancouver, and my case came in to Toronto, or my cases, and I went down to pick them up, and they drove around for about 3 hours inside the cargo area looking for my one case, for my origami case, actually. Couldn't find it. I mean, 3 hours. And they said, oh, it's here. We checked it in. So finally, after 3 hours, the guy goes, I don't know what happened to it. It's gone. So I had insured it. So I said, okay, well, and so we started going through the insurance process. And I said to the insurance guy, I said, well, you got to make sure, like, if I get this started, this is a custom made thing. It's not like anyone in the world could buy this. So whatever part of the process is done, you guys will have to pay for if you find the case. Yeah. But at this point, I thought, okay,
it's gone.
So about 3 weeks later, and I called up George Kimmery because he built my origami. I said, I got to get another one built. And he started on it. I get a phone call, and the guy on the phone says, hi, is your name Greg Frewin? I went, yeah. He goes, we have a luggage here for you. I go, luggage? Thinking luggage. I'm thinking a luggage.
Yeah, like suitcase. Yeah.
I go, no, I got no luggage. He goes, well, it's got your name all over it. I go, really? I'm trying to think of... He goes, yeah, it's this big luggage. I go, how big? He goes, oh, it's like 4 foot by... Oh, said, that's my case. Yeah. Where'd you find it? He goes, and this is bizarre. The Rolling Stones were using one of the airplane hangars in Toronto to rehearse their act. Yeah. It got mixed in with their gear and got sent over to the Rolling Stones gear. So my stuff partied with the Rolling Stones for 3 weeks.
The box was so big, they thought, well, just
they
grab
thought it
that
was
box.
like a road case for the big touring show, right? So
that was the reason that Blackstone painted everything orange. It's like, you think it's orange back there, load it up.
That's a good idea. Never thought of that.
Yeah.
I actually helped them several times unload their trailers when they would go to Abbott's, and I never thought about that. That's a good. See, now the wheels are going. Yeah, but I'm not traveling anymore.
Well, Christian, you can remember that if you start traveling. It's well over there. I want to talk a little bit about marketing before we get into Niagara years of what you've been doing there. But how do you get butts in the seat and sell tickets and get people going? I mean, particularly now with social media, of course, with TripAdvisor and everything else, and trying to get positive reviews and everything. That's where people go now. But for the longest time before that, before we had the digital social media and everything, you had to have all these pamphlets, I would think, that you were handing out, and rack cards and all that.
You know, it started out in the day, it was videotapes was first.
Yeah, sure.
You had to have all your stuff, your 8x10s, your posters, all that stuff was sort of stock normal. And then it went to DVD, and we're like, wow, this is cool. Then it went to DVD where you could put your photo images on there.
Yeah.
So things started to streamline,
quickly.
Started to get, very quickly. And you had to kind of keep up with that. Like,
True.
If you weren't on that sort of, I'll call it cutting edge, but if you weren't involved in that, it cost you a lot more money to.
Did you stay up with that, or did you have a person to do that?
Always. No. I'm still like a very techie tech.
Yeah, me too.
As a matter of fact, my whole entire show, video wall, low-light smoke machines, fog machines, video screens, projection, everything, lighting cues. Even my microphone has a mute, which nobody else has, that mutes automatically as the show's running. That whole entire thing, all of that is ran by one remote control.
Wow.
Integrated all of that stuff. So I'm really
like an audio ape kind of a thing.
Yeah, I don't want to say the audio ape's great, but this is even a step above
that.
Like it's running several different, like Crestron systems with video and different things like that, right? So anyway, I've been doing that since I opened the theater. So I'm very much into tech. I love the whole tech side of things.
Wow. And then as far as the advertising of that, how do you try to keep positive reviews? I guess obviously by just doing delivering a good product.
So, there's a lot of neat tricks, not tricks, but, you have to be careful. I'm not one of those ones to stand on stage and say, hey, if you had a good time, go to TripAdvisor, because there are going to be, no matter what you do. And I don't care who tells you this. If they tell you that they've never had anyone complain in the show, they're lying. They're lying, Scott. Yeah. Don't listen to them. Because there's going to be somebody. Here's the thing. We found over the years, like and as a businessman, and restaurants will tell you this, the minute they show up, the show is started for them. The minute they drive into your parking lot, the minute they go through and they meet the host, they get their ticket, the whole process becomes part of, it's no different than going to Wonderland, or Wonderland's Canada, Disneyland. If you get there and there's enough steps of the beginning of the process that go wrong, or they don't feel they were handled right, you got a customer that ain't going to enjoy that show. I don't care how good you are. You're already battling that point. And nowadays, people feel that they have not the right, but because of social media and we're so easily able to comment on stuff, people want to now tell the world that they had this bad experience.
Right.
So it's very, very important that we keep an eye on that process from the beginning all the way through till they sit down in their seat, till they get their food or whatever if they eat there. Drinks, everything before the show starts. Because then my job's a lot easier.
Well, you listen to those negative comments, obviously, to find out whether they're valid or not. And if they are, I'll correct this.
Correct.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because, you have to be you can't be so ego driven that you can't look at those reviews and say, well, they're not, they're lying. They're
exactly.
You got to look at it and go, well, wait a minute, there's a reason.
Truth to that.
And you can, I've learned now to figure out, I can tell pretty quickly now if it was the beginning process, the middle process, and sometimes it is the show. Like sometimes I've had bad nights, there's nights where you're not on or whatever. And that's why I don't do it on stage. So when I'm doing my autograph signing at the end, that's where I would tell them. And I would tell the people that I know had a really good time. So
that
I
is
filter
wise
out,
right there.
There you go. So if someone at home's going, okay, there's one right there. But yeah, no matter what you do though, you're going to get a few here and there, and it's the toughest thing because even at one point, for example, we had dancers in the show, and I would have the dancers do dance numbers right before the tiger illusion, so I could go and help load the cats and put them into the prop or whatever, and just keep it all safe. And there was a point in the show, years ago, we had 3 dance numbers, each about 60 seconds. So we're talking.
Well, you were off the stage.
Well, I'm off the stage.
Yeah.
3 to 4 minutes, let's say. And people complain, there's too much dancing in the show. And they're writing a review. And I'm like, well, it's 3 minutes. But
out of what, 90-minute show?
95 to even more.
And an intermission? No?
Intermission. We do about an hour and 45 now with intermission, yeah.
Okay.
Intermission's really important. Make a lot of money at intermission.
Okay.
Make a lot of money at intermission.
And do you pitch? I mean, like I know, like in Rick Thomas's, again, he's got the IMAG screens, they're saying, hey, that you could do this and this, and here's what's available back there. So how do you pitch?
Very well. Here's I believe is here's two things. I think I'm a soft pitch. I do a soft pitch, meaning I don't push too hard. I think if you push too hard, I think you actually hurt your sales. I think they have to know there's something available at the magic shop.
They want to take something home with.
Yes, correct. Yes, but if you push too hard, I think it turns people off. They look at it and then and I think, and I don't know this because I've never done this, but I think that's where you'll find some people that might comment on a review. Well, they push the whatever it would be.
Right? Trying to get extra money out of it.
Yeah, so I think you got to be careful. You gotta know. You got to be. I think you got to be subtle with enough push that they know it's there, and if they like you, I think you got good chance of selling them something.
Do you have something that's low, medium, and higher costs?
We've over the years, because we do with the tigers, we had tiger stuffies and the parrot stuffies. Now we've found these really good duck stuffies. We have them all. So we've grown over the years, like our magic shop's so there's a variety of different size
magic kits, and
magic kits, small all the way up to large ones. We got posters, different size and different. So we have a good plethora of things to sell.
Do you allow and/or encourage people to take photos or
never
to
in
record
the show.
anything?
Never in
the
the show. Never in the show.
You tell them not to.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Because I've heard some people who have said you can go ahead and record like the first few minutes, but then after that, I want you to turn off and focus on the show. But I know you're going to do it, so you might as well get it out of your system.
So
and be sure you post it and hashtag whatever.
Okay. So we get a lot of tourists in Niagara Falls from foreign countries that don't speak English.
Oh.
And if you try to tell them that, and everyone's got their phones out, they think, okay, we can, and then they don't stop.
I see.
And more so we did back in the day when the cats were in the show, the tigers, we didn't allow it because the problem would be is people would have flashes on their camera. More so back then, right? Flash, all through. And then, of course, the cats would get like startled a bit. What's going on? Like, why am I got paparazzi here?
Right.
So we just decided it's easier and it becomes a distraction. People really should, I always find it funny. We go to we spend all of our lives wanting to go, say, to Italy. And we go all the way there, and then people spend more time on their phone taking pictures than actually enjoying it.
Yeah, seeing it through the lens of a camera rather than their own lens of their eyeball.
Correct. I actually saw a great post, and it was a whole bunch of younger people, not too young, but younger people. They were watching some event, and it was just a picture of this crowd. And it was one little old lady standing in the front with no camera. Everyone else had their phones out, and they were looking at their phones, and she was just standing watching. Yeah. And the caption was something along the lines of, well, at least there's one person that's enjoying life for real. And I think that's what we sometimes forget, that I'd rather sit at a show and be involved in the show. Right. So I think that's a thing. I think it makes more sense not to have your phones out.
And you can let them take pictures afterwards. Did you have your cats out later? They could take pictures.
We could do it. We had a whole photo opportunity where you can come up and get a photo with the cat. We even did a VIP backstage tour where you could come back, meet the cats. I'd bring one out. They could pet them. And it was great because that was the time that I could educate. I could tell people why these animals are almost extinct in the wild.
And that's important for them.
And it's not because of a magic show, by the way. Some people like PETA might say. Yeah. It's actually because they're hunted, and they're hunted for their...
Predators have predators.
Sure, but...
Humans.
That's it. And that's the one. It's the human predator. And it's sad because on the black market, a tiger's worth about $50,000 for its entire body.
I'm glad you said that. Yeah. I remember that was where Rick Thomas was saying that as well, about how...
It's sad. And I'll go this far. I had to be careful politically. I didn't want to get there was a lot of things that I'd see go on in Canada with different, and once again, I'm still not comfortable sharing it yet, but different zoos that were, with the government's help, shipping tigers over to China. And here's the thing.
To their zoos? To Chinese zoos?
How many zoos are in China? I've been there many times. There ain't that. The amount of cats that were going over there, to me, was, in my mind, and what I believe, they were supplying the supply over there of, because in China they use... the testicles for one thing. They use that people don't know. Tiger Balm actually has tiger oil from the tiger skin in it. And if you see real Tiger Balm that's made in China, I don't use it
because it's got real tiger DNA in it.
Correct.
Wow.
Correct. So anyway, I was able to educate people during the VIP tour, and it was interesting because there'd always be somebody on that. We'd only do it for up to 40 people, and it usually was pretty sold out. And there would always be that one person with their hands crossed, like, okay, I'm here to see this.
Yes.
You know, I know
they're being misused.
There's misuse or whatever, blah, blah, you know. And then by the end of the tour, those people will be totally different because that's when they get to see, hear, feel, touch. They get that experience. And I think that was a really cool thing for me. I really enjoyed doing that part of the show.
That is pretty cool. I remember Reza in Branson also has a backstage tour after the thing is over. He's got a VIP thing, so people sit in the front row, and he talks to them, said, I'll answer basically about any question except how is it done. Right. And then he will teach them a trick, and then he says, come take a picture with my helicopter, you know, and let me show you my dressing room, and let me show you the tour bus. And people feel like they're really getting to know him.
Correct.
You know.
Correct.
How far do you go as far as your VIP?
So that was sort of basis how the VIP tour went, and we're now, as Christian's taking over the show, we're going to start a VIP tour similar to that. But we have actually some really clever, I think, some really clever things we're going to do. But that's the thing. The whole idea will be to let them get the feeling of what it's like to be backstage. What is it like for a performer?
That's what a VIP package is supposed to include.
Because I've seen a few, I won't mention names, where you basically go click, boom, done. And it's like...
And you pay extra for that.
Yeah.
It's like,
and I'm like, okay, it was cool to get the picture, but that's it. So this will be a little more...
I know what you mean.
A little more, experience driven, right? As a matter of fact, we're designing, and I won't get too much into it yet, but we're designing a section in the theater that will actually rotate and be a small little stage in the theater front area that is just the VIP during the show. The VIP ticket buyers are all right there surrounding a center area that's a small stage that they get to see one or two routines done. Everyone else gets to see it too, but more from the IMAX screens and stuff, right?
So you get more intimate up-close experience.
Get a whole different experience than everybody else.
It would be completely different.
Yeah.
Now, I do want to talk about Niagara and then get to talk with Christian a little bit then as well. But you started, I said, a couple decades ago. When exactly was that the theater opened, and how has that grown?
18 years ago now.
Okay.
So that would have been 2004. We actually started the process many years before that. We had to find investment and then find the property. And it was very important. Niagara Falls is not a big area.
Correct.
So we had to find that right property that could house a theater big enough and also be close enough to everything without being too far out of town. Because the minute you have to have someone drive too far or they can't find you, whatever, you're done. You know, you're that the old saying, location.
Right. You can't be off the beaten track.
Correct.
To be a one-off to go and see that, regardless of how big of a pull that may be.
And here's the other thing that people don't realize is the hotels don't want people going too far away.
They want people to stay and eat there and use their bar.
Correct. If you have to go a half hour out of town, well, that's a chance people are going to go, well, we better leave early. We'll go get dinner when we get there, whatever, right?
Yeah, right.
So now the hoteliers won't support you. So there's a lot of things on the business side you have to really think about with all of that on location.
That's good advice there then as well.
Yeah.
Did you still, or are you still in the same location where you were and just expanded? Did you have room to build on? Or
the building itself is 40,000 square feet. It's
Holy
huge.
moly. Yeah.
And so the theater itself hasn't expanded. It's 650 seats.
Was it a warehouse or something to begin with?
It was actually, yes. It was an old warehouse. So Niagara Falls used to be an industrial area, believe it or not, before it became a tourist area.
What did they make?
Well, the place that we were in was they used to make canoes.
Wow.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have guessed
that. And then right next door to it was the board and milk plant. They would do all milk. It's now a hotel.
Okay.
So there used to be all these industry there.
Sure.
Right across the street behind us is the Nabisco. They make all cereal and whatever. It's still there.
Yeah.
So it really has just grown over the last, 40, 50 years has grown to what it is now. But
a population of about what?
I don't know.
200,000?
Yeah, no, not even. I don't think it's even 100. 120 maybe.
I know the Houdini Museum burned down many years ago.
Yep.
I went to it once. I'm glad I did.
Yeah. Oh, no, it was cool because I lived only a half hour. I was there all the time. As a matter of fact, my very first before I did the I.B.Ms and all that, I was doing my bird act at a little theater called Lily Langtree Theater in Niagara Falls.
Okay.
And it was actually where the casino was supposed to be built. In the last minute, the government pulled the casino licenses, didn't allow it. So the casino never got finished, so they just turned it into a mall with a theater.
Yeah.
And I worked there for about 2 years. That's how I got my chops with the bird act before going to Abbott's and all that. But so the Houdini Museum was right there. I go see it all the time. It was cool.
Yeah, how cool
so
was
cool.
that?
So cool.
So as you're saying, you're kind of slowly easing into retirement, if you will, and think about spending more time down in Florida and handing it over then to Christian as well. Kind of reminds me again of Siegfried and Roy and Darren and Romeo, which they were saying, okay, here's going to be our successor, kind of a thing. So Christian, how'd you get involved with all this with Greg? Okay.
So I fell in love with magic when I was 9 years old. I had a magician come to my birthday party. His name was Kelvin's Magic. And just a little backstory. Greg's from Stony Creek, which is the same town I'm from. Greg went to Saltfleet High School, which is the same high school I went to, but it was now under a different name. A mini clone, you could say. But so at age 14, I was working restaurants. I was working restaurants. And when I was 9, my mom took me to see Greg for the very first time. And that was the first time I ever saw a live big theater show. And I walked out of there saying to my mom, that's what I'm going to do. And, Mom's very supportive at the young age. She said, yeah, for sure, honey, And, but I was headstrong on it. And from that day on, I just practiced every single day, studied everything I could. And at 15, I didn't even have my driver's license yet. I got a job on the popcorn stand at Greg's Theater. And I was having my friend who was a little older, he would drive me back and forth. And some of the money I would make, I'd pay him for gas just to take me there. At 16, I got mine and then slowly worked my way up. Greg invited me to work backstage. And just the experience of seeing everything like Greg was mentioning earlier on a business side, how important it is. You can't have one without the other.
Right.
And seeing how many people are involved and all the behind the scenes, what you see on the front is, that's the show. It looks easy. But when you see everything that takes place, it's
the logistics and everything, the blocking.
Yes.
I thought about that whenever I remember seeing a LeGrand David show in in Massachusetts, Beverly. It's amazing about how they move things in and out and make it look effortless. And the same thing backstage. You got to learn all of that.
Of course. And the show that Greg was doing at the time was just pow, pow, one after the other.
Right.
And seeing the way that everything's organized to come in so smooth, so grateful for that experience because it changes your whole perspective on what this actually is rather than just walking out there and doing some tricks,
Right.
And so I'm grateful for that. I've been on stage now performing with Greg for a year and a little bit now, and it's been the craziest times of my life.
So does he introduce you then and say, here's Christian, and so then you do a couple of illusions on your own, he steps off stage?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Do you have a little bit different kind of a personality?
Actually, I'll step into that.
Okay.
He's doing about half the show right now, or a little more actually, but it's funny because it's great. It's a great feeling, but also a little bit of an eye opener. I would go out at first and do autographs on my own. Before I started bringing Christian out. And one night, these ladies all came up to me and said, "Where's the good-looking young guy?" And I said, "What's wrong with the old dude?" so it works out pretty good.
So, and do you use the same dancers, I assume, that Greg's using the show as well?
Same assistants.
Okay, yeah. And whenever that you are working with those, are they your routines or are they things that Greg has kind of taught you, that a little bit of both? I know because Greg, you've worked a lot like with the Chinese. Who was that a while back?
Din Yang.
Din Yang, for example.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we're doing a little bit of both, and we do tons of collaboration on some new stuff too. So it's great to have, somebody to work with and share ideas back and forth. Are
you adding new illusions that Greg didn't have?
Yes, slowly. We're starting to build some new ones.
Yeah, and I'll kind of touch in on that. One of the things that the hardest part about this is to create a whole new show and put it out there.
Yeah.
As you know, creating stuff doesn't always at first work, or maybe not. By the time you polish it, you might get it to a level where it might be good. Sometimes not. Things are all. So we've made sure that the show's kept all the hits in it for now. So as we slowly start to now take pieces out, we can put pieces in and experiment.
Right.
Because the biggest thing is I want to make sure we had some original stuff, but I also want to make sure there's some pieces that
are solid,
that are audience tested, and work. So it's so slowly over the next year to year and a half, the whole idea will be to have a complete new show, or for the most part, 90% all new, because there are a few pieces we'll never take out that are just so good.
Sure, they got to stay in, right? Yeah. It reminds me a little bit like of David Copperfield on The Alien, how he loves that trick and he's kept it in, and even though that it had to evolve to where it is then now, he knew there was something there, kept working with it.
Yep.
So I'm sure you got some things like that are good ideas you're working with.
Yes, we have a few of them. I don't know if
we'll keep it quiet
keep them on the down low. Yeah. But
Need to come to Niagara to see it.
Yes, of course. There will be some really exciting things that are coming up soon.
Yeah. So where can people go to get tickets, or how do they find?
GregFrewinTheatre.com.
Is that R-E or E-R? At the end.
R-E. Okay. Yes, the Canadian way.
As they say the right way.
Yes. And the show is called Wonder.
Wonder.
Yes.
Okay. So that way that it can be anybody else's show. It's not the Greg Frewin Wonder show.
Yes.
It's just the Wonder.
Yes.
Okay, show. Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, and on that, one of the things that we're, for probably the first 3 years, because, and this is not to knock Christian in any way, but I've got a big reputation in town. I've been there almost 18 years now. Everybody, all the hotels know me. So the show will still be the Greg Frewin Theatre.
Number one probably attraction. In
Niagara. And we had to be careful, because if we just all of a sudden change everything and then, is it the same show? There's a lot of confusion. So we'll be the Greg Frewin Theatre presents.
That makes sense.
Christian Mascia.
People are coming back all the time.
Yeah, because we still need to keep that for now. And then as he builds his career, he builds his name, he builds that. And on a marketing side, we can slowly change that over. And eventually the idea will be then it becomes fully,
Right. Yeah. That sounds great.
So it's a learning lesson for everybody. I've never done this before. I've never had to retire and push everything over to somebody else. So you start learning a little bit along the way. But I knew ahead of time that that's one of the things we'll have to do, is make sure, more so for the hotels and the people that sell our tickets, they gotta know what it is. And
well, I can never see you, Greg, retiring. I mean, from the standpoint of going down to Florida, I would think you'd be getting involved with somebody or something, plus back in Canada as well. And I'll
say this: one of my goals or plans is I build illusions. I've done some building for other guys over the years, but not a lot, because I've been always so busy, and I build for myself mostly. But now that was my end goal, my sort of end of the career, to build and just be in my shop during the day and have the nights off. And so I'm going to be doing all of that. I'm going to also start doing more, like I did with Ding Yang, more consulting work. And I'll still jump out and do an odd cruise ship here or there, or corporate gig. I'm not going to stop performing. And I won't just sit on the couch, no.
Right.
And without getting too far into it, there is one other thing I'll be doing in Florida that might be similar to something I'm doing now. But I'll just leave it there. I'll leave you in a little suspense with that one.
A little tantalizing.
It might be another business opportunity.
Could be. So, interesting.
Yeah.
So if you put together, listeners, some of the things that he's talked about along the way early on, where he will be, and the opportunities, you can kind of maybe put some puzzle pieces together. There
you go.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay, well, as we close, I want to thank both of you guys very much for your time and being here.
No problem.
The name of my podcast is called The Magic Word Podcast. And so let me ask you, Christian, first of all, what is your philosophy of life? What's important to you?
Be kind, treat everybody with the same respect you would want to be treated with, and don't take life for granted. And I think especially after these past COVID years, a lot of people have learned,
Love
that.
It. That sounds great.
Thank you.
Greg?
Well, I think it's sort. If you would have asked me this at Christian's age, I would have had one whole answer. But I think everything he said for sure.
Yeah.
And I think I think in the end of the day, you have to wake up and there's two things I think you need to do. You have to wake up and believe in yourself. And you have to enjoy who and what you are. And with that, I think it helps. Because, as I went through my career, there was some rough times with my wife and I and traveling. And, it puts a lot of stress on family. You have to learn that in the end of the day, family will always be there for you. Others may not. And so I think for me, like, family is the most important thing. And I think, and that comes with my animals too. Like, they're part of the family. So I think, you just have to wake up every day, enjoy who you are, enjoy your family, enjoy life. And the rest of it, what we do, the career goals, what we do in life, that's just an extra icing on the cake.
Right.
Very
good. Guys, thanks very much.
No
appreciate
problem.
your time, appreciate your words and your friendship. Thanks very much, and good luck also then, Christian, in the future years at the Greg Frewin Theatre.
Thank you. And thank you, Scott. Appreciate you having us on
Thanks,
today.
Greg. So with the Magic Word Podcast, that was Christian Mascia and Greg Frewin. Scotty out. Thank you very much, Greg and Christian, for joining us on this podcast this week. That was fascinating. I can't believe how that hour went by so quickly. Actually, a little bit more than that. I appreciate your time, your words, and your friendship. That was fascinating, really interesting. And I also hope the rest of you, the listeners, enjoyed that as much as I did. I want to thank also our sponsor this week, which is, of course, Magic at the Beach, which is going to be October the 5th, 6th, and 7th coming up this year. And you can get more information at magicatthebeach.org. I also want to remind everyone, if you're going to be preparing for the holidays and purchasing anything for not only holiday gifts, but also birthday or anything at all, whenever you go to Amazon, be sure to go all the way to the bottom of the podcast blog, and you will see an ad there, which you can just click on. It will take you to Amazon. It'll open up your account, and anything that you purchase, since we're an affiliate of Amazon, we get a few pennies of that. So thank you very much for clicking on that and helping to support us that way. If you can help us with your financial donation or pledge, that would be greatly appreciated as well. We also suggest that you make sure to subscribe to the pod letter. If you go to the magicwordpodcast.com, you'll see a little pop-up where that you can subscribe to the pod letter, and that way you keep up to date each week of knowing who's going to be on and who's going to be up next week, and also suggestions from the archives. Well, sorry for this going on a little bit long, but I do appreciate you guys coming back and listening from week to week. As this podcast episode is being broadcast, I am actually in Germany right now. As I had reported on earlier episodes, I was going to be traveling over there, and I am looking forward to making some connections while I am there. In fact, I'm going to be lecturing both in Munich and in Berlin, in addition, of course, to spending a little bit of time there at Oktoberfest, which should be some fun. And I look forward to you coming back next week when our guest will be someone who has already been mentioned in the pod letter. So if you subscribe to the pod letter, you know who's going to be on. And so, until next week, stay well, get booked, and remember to be kind, treat others with respect, don't take life for granted, and when you wake up each morning, believe in yourself and enjoy who and what you are. This is Scotty out.